They all rose in perfect unison, as if they'd been practicing this moment for weeks. Maybe they had. 23 members of my international operations team standing silently behind Alton, our senior director, who remained at the conference table directly facing the board members. "We no longer have confidence in Zoya's leadership," Alton announced, his voice carrying an authority he had no right to claim. "The standardization approach she's implementing is destroying client relationships we've spent years building across our global markets." My presentation on screen showing improved metrics across 3 continents seemed suddenly irrelevant as all eyes darted between my standing team and me. "This isn't personal," Alton continued, though the slight curl of satisfaction at the corner of his mouth suggested otherwise. "We've tried supporting these initiatives, but the regional offices are in open revolt. We've lost Brightway and Universal already. Meridian is threatening to leave. We're imposing Western solutions on markets that operate differently." Chairman Weiss removed his glasses, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "This is highly irregular, Alton. Irregular times require irregular measures," Alton replied. "We felt the board needed to hear directly from those closest to our global partners." From around the room, my team members began offering perfectly rehearsed concerns. Singapore office reported 40% client dissatisfaction with the new procedures. "Our Brazilian partners are threatening to walk. The standardized approach completely ignores cultural considerations in emerging markets." Their complaints created a wave of murmurs among board members. 6 months of my work dismantled in minutes by a coordinated ambush. "Zoya," Chairman Weiss finally turned to me, his expression unreadable. "Do you have anything to say in your defense?" I remained seated, my hands perfectly still on the polished table. 23 pairs of eyes watched me, some with triumph, others with pity, a few unable to meet my gaze at all. "Actually," I replied, voice steady despite the public execution of my professional reputation unfolding around me. "I anticipated this might happen. Chairman Weiss, would you please open the sealed envelope I gave you this morning?" Alton's confident posture faltered slightly. Chairman Weiss reached for a thick envelope in his portfolio. "This one?" I nodded. "Everything the board needs to know is inside." Before we continue with what happened next, thank you for taking time to listen to my story today. If you're enjoying it so far, please hit that like button. It really helps others find these corporate revenge stories too. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, subscribe to the channel so you never miss an upload. Now, let's get back to that boardroom where my entire department had just staged their rebellion. My name is Zoya Ayad. At 34, I was the youngest executive ever appointed to lead international operations at our multinational company. My background wasn't typical for someone in this position. I grew up in a small apartment above my parents' neighborhood grocery store, worked through college on scholarship, and built my reputation by solving complex operational problems at firms others had given up on. I specialize in standardizing inconsistent systems, creating order from chaos. It's what earned me recognition in the industry, and ultimately led to this role. The board hired me with a clear mandate: unify our global divisions after losing 3 multinational clients who couldn't navigate our inconsistent regional processes. What my colleagues didn't know about me, I'd spent my childhood developing an almost supernatural ability to read people. When you grow up watching your immigrant parents navigate prejudice while building a business, you learn to spot insincerity before the fake smile even forms. This skill served me well professionally, allowing me to identify resistance before it became sabotage. Usually, 6 months earlier, I'd walked into this same boardroom for my first day, greeted by Chairman Weiss, and introduced to the senior leadership team. Alton had risen from his seat with a calculated smile, congratulating me on the appointment. "We're all impressed with your track record," he said, shaking my hand, "looking forward to working together." Only later did I learn Alton had been the internal candidate for my position. He'd spent 12 years climbing ranks, building alliances across regional offices. Everyone had expected him to get the promotion, including Alton himself. Instead, the board brought in an outsider, me. My first week, I scheduled individual meetings with each regional director. Kendra from European Operations spoke openly about communication challenges between offices. Liam from Latin America highlighted redundant approval processes, slowing client response times. Each conversation revealed the same underlying issue. Our company operated as 7 separate businesses, sharing one logo. The global consistency audit I conducted confirmed this fragmentation was costing us millions annually and had directly contributed to losing those 3 major clients. I presented my standardization proposal to leadership in week 3. Alton raised thoughtful questions, appearing supportive while subtly highlighting potential resistance points. These changes make perfect sense from headquarters' perspective, he noted, but our Asian offices operate differently. Their relationships are built on tradition and personal connection, not efficiency metrics. His concerns sounded reasonable. I modified the implementation timeline, adding regional consultation phases. Alton nodded approvingly. Much better approach, he said. I'll help you navigate the cultural nuances. What I didn't realize then, while appearing cooperative in leadership meetings, Alton was holding different conversations behind closed doors. I discovered this accidentally in month 2. After a late strategy session, I forgot my notebook and returned to find Alton speaking with 5 regional managers. Just need to weather this, he was saying. New executives always come in with grand transformation plans. Most fail within a year when they realize the cultural complexities. I retreated before being noticed, my mind connecting previously isolated incidents, the delayed data from Asian offices, the sudden technical issues preventing European teams from adopting the new reporting dashboard, the Latin American clients who mysteriously developed concerns about standardization immediately after Alton's relationship-building visits. Rather than confrontation, I chose observation. Over the next month, I documented patterns of subtle sabotage, reports mysteriously missing key data, implementation timelines extended for increasingly vague regional considerations, client feedback selectively shared, negative, amplified, positive, buried. Then came the meeting that confirmed everything. I had asked Priscilla, my project coordinator, to schedule a video conference with all regional offices to address implementation concerns directly. I tried, she reported back, but Alton suggested regional breakout sessions instead. He's already organized them for next week. Without consulting me, Priscilla looked uncomfortable. He said you approved the approach conceptually. I hadn't. That evening, I accessed the company calendar and found Alton had scheduled himself to speak privately with each regional team before my official sessions. The subject line, standardization concerns, preparing for leadership discussion. I was being systematically undermined by someone positioned as my strongest ally. The damage was spreading. Team members began avoiding my meetings, citing conflicts. Implementation deadlines slipped. The board started asking questions about the lack of progress. I stood at a crossroads. Confront Alton directly or develop a different strategy entirely. That's when Lana, a junior analyst recently transferred from our Singapore office, knocked on my door after hours. Her hands trembled as she closed the door behind her. I shouldn't be here, she whispered. But what's happening isn't right. What's happening? I asked, though I suspected I already knew. There's a coordinated effort to make your standardization initiative fail, she said. Anyone showing support for your changes is being sidelined. Those raising concerns are rewarded. Alton has promised leadership positions in the new structure once you're gone. New structure? Lana looked down. Alton tells everyone you won't last the year. He says board members are already discussing your replacement. The revelation wasn't surprising, but the scope of the sabotage was larger than I'd imagined. An entire shadow campaign, operating throughout my department. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I transferred here to work for you specifically, Lana replied. Your standardization approach is exactly what we needed in Singapore. Our inefficiency was embarrassing, but now I'm being told to find problems with the same solutions I know work. I thanked her for her honesty, asked her to document what she'd observed, and promised confidentiality. That night, staring at my ceiling at 3 a.m., I made my decision. I wouldn't fight this battle on Alton's terms. Confronting him would only trigger preemptive defenses he'd clearly prepared. Instead, I needed evidence so irrefutable that once revealed, no amount of manipulation could dismiss it. The next morning, I requested a private meeting with Chairman Weiss. I need to discuss something sensitive, I began, but I'm asking you to take no action yet. Just listen. I explained the situation to Chairman Weiss Alton's systematic undermining, the shadow coalition he'd built, and the false narrative about regional resistance to standardization. Serious allegations, Weiss said, expression neutral. Do you have evidence? Not enough, I admitted. Not yet. That's why I'm not asking for action. I'm asking for time. He studied me for a long moment. 3 months. Show me results or evidence of deliberate obstruction. Otherwise, I'll have to reconsider the standardization initiative and your position. 3 months to save my job, my reputation, and the company's future. The clock was ticking. I developed a 3-part strategy. First, I would personally visit each regional office to observe operations firsthand. Second, I would quietly connect with our recently departed clients to understand their true reasons for leaving. Third, I would create a parallel implementation track with a small, trusted team, documenting everything. I began with the client outreach. Officially, we had lost Brightway, Universal, and Suntech because they found partners better aligned with their regional needs. But when I connected with their operations directors, a different story emerged. We left because we couldn't get consistent service across markets, explained Universal's global operations head during our confidential lunch. One office would process approvals in hours. Another would take weeks for the exact same request. Was cultural sensitivity the issue? I asked, echoing Alton's frequent claim. She laughed. That's what your team kept saying. But we operate in 38 countries ourselves. We understand cultural differences. What we couldn't understand was why your Asian office had 7 extra approval steps that your European office didn't require. Wasn't that explained as necessary for local market conditions? That's what your senior director claimed. But when we implemented our own global standard last year, we discovered those necessary cultural adaptations were actually protecting special arrangements for certain clients. Special arrangements, preferential pricing, expedited service, custom solutions that weren't offered to others. The regional offices fought standardization because it would expose these inconsistencies. The pattern repeated with each former client. Our regional flexibility wasn't cultural sensitivity, it was selective favoritism, creating the exact inefficiencies driving away global clients. My regional office visits revealed more. In Singapore, I discovered 2 separate pricing structures, the official one and an accommodation schedule for select clients with connections to regional leadership. In Sao Paulo, certain requests bypass standard review processes through a separate workflow handled personally by Alton's longtime ally. In Frankfurt, implementation delays were blamed on technical limitations that mysteriously disappeared when Alton approved an exception. Most revealing was what happened when I arrived unannounced at our Mumbai office. Regional Director Vikram was openly collaborating with my standardization team until he received a call during our meeting. Alton, yes, she's here now. Vikram stepped away, lowering his voice, but not enough. No, I haven't said anything about those accounts. Of course, I understand what's at stake. When he returned, his enthusiastic cooperation had transformed into cautious hesitation. I pretended not to notice. You were saying about the implementation timeline? Actually, Vikram stammered, I believe we need to reconsider our approach. There are cultural considerations. Cultural considerations, I repeated. Like what specifically? His explanation was vague, recycling almost verbatim the talking points I'd heard in other regions after Alton's visits. Back at headquarters, I assembled a small team I could trust. Lana from Singapore, Ryan from accounting, and Ellis from the London office. Working after hours, we created detailed documentation comparing client retention rates between offices, implementing standardization and those resisting. The numbers were undeniable. Standardized regions showed 32% higher client retention. I also needed to understand how deep Alton's influence ran within my department. Through confidential one-on-ones with team members, carefully framed as standardization feedback sessions, I mapped the web of loyalties. 5 directors reported directly to Alton regardless of the organizational chart. 7 others were swayed by career promises. The remaining 11 followed along, fearing isolation if they supported my initiatives. 2 months in, I had substantial evidence, but still needed to connect Alton directly to the deliberate sabotage. The opportunity came unexpectedly when Meridian, our largest remaining global client, requested an urgent review of their service inconsistencies across regions. We've been promised standardization for months, their director of global operations complained. Yet, we're still seeing wildly different processes in each region. I personally led the Meridian review, requesting complete data from all regional offices. Alton volunteered to coordinate regional responses, exactly what I had hoped for. That would be helpful, I agreed. But I'll need the raw data as well, not just the summary. Raw data isn't necessary for your presentation, he countered smoothly. I'll provide everything you need. I prefer being thorough, I insisted. His smile tightened. Of course, the night before data was due, I received Alton's summary report showing minimal inconsistencies. But I had already secured the raw data directly from Meridian's systems. Through their operations director, showing major discrepancies Alton had deliberately concealed. More damning was the email chain I obtained from a troubled regional manager in Tokyo who could no longer stomach the deception. The thread showed Alton explicitly instructing regional offices to present minimal compliance while preserving our established client arrangements and document any implementation problems for future reference. Most revealing was his message. Our priority is protecting regional autonomy until leadership changes. Cooperate visibly, but ensure minimal actual change. With the evidence assembled, I prepared identical documentation packages with supporting materials, client statements, comparative performance data, and internal communications exposing the sabotage campaign. I sealed each in an envelope for every board member, preparing to distribute them at our quarterly review. The night before the presentation, I received a text from Priscilla. Emergency department meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. Alton called it mandatory attendance. I arrived to find my entire team already assembled. Alton stood at the front, uncharacteristically tense. Thank you all for coming, he began. As you know, Zoya presents to the board at 10 a.m. This is a critical moment for our department's future. He paced slowly. I've spoken with each of you about the concerns we have with the standardization approach, the damage to client relationships, the ignorance of regional realities, the declining morale. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the room. I've attempted addressing these issues directly, he continued, but I've been met with resistance. He paused dramatically. Sometimes leadership requires difficult actions when normal channels fail. My stomach tightened as I realized what was happening. I'm asking each of you to stand with me today, Alton continued. During Zoya's presentation, I will express our collective concerns directly to the board. When I stand, I ask you all to stand with me, showing united opposition to this damaging standardization approach. The room fell silent. Then slowly, heads began nodding. This isn't personal, Alton assured them, glancing at me with mock sympathy. It's about protecting our client relationships and regional expertise. I remained silent, watching as my team unanimously agreed to this public humiliation. Several couldn't meet my eyes. Others showed open satisfaction. With perfect timing, Alton added, sometimes the board needs to see a physical representation of department sentiment. This visual statement will make clear what written reports haven't conveyed. As the meeting dispersed, Ellis, one of my trusted allies, whispered, should we warn Chairman Weiss? No, I replied quietly. Let everything proceed exactly as Alton planned. I made only one change to my preparation. Instead of distributing documentation to all board members, I placed everything into a single sealed envelope, which I handed personally to Chairman Weiss before the meeting began. I request you don't open this until I indicate during the presentation, I said. He raised an eyebrow but nodded, placing the envelope in his portfolio. My presentation began precisely at 10 a.m. I outlined the standardization progress, highlighting improved metrics across markets that had implemented the unified processes. The board members nodded approvingly until Alton stood. One by one, my entire department rose behind him, 23 staff members, every person standing in silent opposition to my leadership. Their synchronized uprising was more effective than Alton could have hoped, a visual representation of complete departmental rejection. We no longer have confidence in Zoya's leadership, Alton announced, his rehearsed speech landing with practiced conviction. As the coordinated complaints flowed from my team and confusion spread among board members, I remained seated, watching Chairman Weiss. His expression shifted from surprise to concern to something I couldn't quite read. When he finally asked if I had anything to say in my defense, I simply requested he open the envelope I'd given him. As he began reviewing its contents, Alton's confident expression faltered. For the first time since I'd known him, uncertainty flashed across his face. The chairman's expression hardened as he progressed through the documents. Whatever he saw in those pages was changing everything. I think, Chairman Weiss said finally, closing the folder with deliberate precision, "We need to continue this meeting privately. Everyone except board members and Senior Director Alton, please wait outside." As I stood to leave with the others, Weiss added, "Not you, Zoya. You stay." The look of confusion on Alton's face was the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him in 6 months. The boardroom door closed, leaving just the 7 board members, Alton, and me. An uncomfortable silence hung as Chairman Weiss methodically arranged the documents from my envelope on the table. "Alton," Weiss began, his voice unnervingly calm, "are you familiar with Client Meridian's regional service discrepancies?" Alton straightened. "Of course. As I've been explaining, their concerns stem from Zoya's standardization approach, ignoring regional market realities." "Interesting." Weiss slid forward a document. "Because according to Meridian's Global Operations Director, they've been requesting standardization for months. Their complaint is that we've failed to deliver consistent service despite promising it." Alton blinked rapidly. "There's been some miscommunication then. Our regional offices have been explicitly instructed by you to resist implementation while appearing cooperative." Weiss interrupted, pushing forward an email printout. "Would you like to explain this message to the Tokyo office?" The color drained from Alton's face as he recognized his own words. Asterisk. "Our priority is protecting regional autonomy until leadership changes. Cooperate visibly, but ensure minimal actual change." Asterisk. "That's being taken out of context," Alton stammered. "Perhaps you can provide context for these then." Weiss spread several more documents across the table. Comparative data showing 32% higher client retention in regions actually implementing standardization. Statements from former clients Brightway and Universal, confirming they left specifically because of inconsistent service across regions. Documentation of special pricing arrangements for select clients, with connections to regional leadership arrangements that violate our own compliance policies. Board member Harriet leaned forward. "Is this accurate, Alton? Have you been deliberately undermining the standardization initiative the board unanimously approved?" "I've been protecting valuable client relationships," Alton insisted, his composure cracking. "These standardized processes might work for Western markets, but they destroy the personal relationships we've built in Asia and Latin America." "Then perhaps you can explain this," Weiss said, revealing a spreadsheet. "Client satisfaction ratings across all regions before and after standardization implementation. Notice how satisfaction scores actually improved by 28% in standardized regions?" Alton's eyes darted around the table, finding no allies. "Those numbers don't reflect the full picture. Some relationships can't be measured in satisfaction surveys." "Like your relationship with Takashi Holdings?" asked another board member, reviewing a document. "The client that receives priority service unavailable to others, bypassing our standard workflows through what's described here as the Alton channel? The same client whose CEO provided a recommendation for your internal application for the international operations position?" The facade was crumbling. Alton's shoulders sagged as he realized the depth of evidence against him. "You positioned yourself as protecting regional interests," Weiss continued. "But these documents show you were protecting a system of preferential treatment that benefited select clients, coincidentally ones with personal connections to you and your allied regional directors." "Connections are how business works in these regions," Alton argued weakly. "Not at this company," Weiss replied. "Not anymore." For the next 30 minutes, the board methodically worked through my documentation. Every defense Alton offered was countered by evidence I'd carefully compiled. His rebellion had transformed from a power move into a professional execution his own. Finally, Weiss turned to me. "Throughout all this, there's one thing I don't understand, Zoya. You clearly knew about this sabotage campaign for months. Why wait until today to present this evidence? Why allow this public confrontation to happen?" The entire board turned to me. "Because this was never about Alton or me," I answered. "It was about our company's future. Had I presented this evidence earlier, it would have been dismissed as a personal conflict, my word, against a respected senior director with 12 years tenure. The narrative would have remained that I was an outsider, imposing impractical standards on established regional operations." I gestured toward the door, where my team waited. Those 23 people believed they were protecting the company from harmful change. They weren't being malicious. They were following a leader they trusted. By allowing today's events to unfold exactly as Alton planned, the situation became undeniable. You knew they would stand against you? Harriet asked, incredulous. I counted on it, I confirmed. Their coordinated action proved this wasn't isolated resistance, but an organized campaign. More importantly, now that the truth is exposed, healing can begin. They need to understand this standardization isn't arbitrary corporate bureaucracy, but necessary for our survival in global markets. Weiss nodded slowly. What do you recommend we do next? First, Alton needs to be removed not just for undermining company strategy, but for creating preferential systems that violate our ethics policies. Second, we need direct reporting lines from regional offices to eliminate the filtering of information. Third, I need authority to restructure leadership in regions where resistance has been strongest. The board discussed briefly before Weiss turned to Alton. Please wait outside while we complete our deliberations. After Alton left, the remaining discussion took less than 15 minutes. The board unanimously supported my recommendations. We'll announce leadership changes tomorrow, Weiss concluded. For now, I'd like to speak with Zoya alone. Once the other board members left, Weiss studied me with new respect. Your approach was unusual, he said. Most executives would have fought this battle differently, called out the sabotage immediately, demanded loyalty, created an us versus them environment, which would have divided the company further, I noted. My goal wasn't winning a power struggle, but creating a properly functioning global operation. You allowed yourself to be publicly humiliated as part of your strategy, he observed. Temporary humiliation is meaningless compared to lasting impact, I replied. I learned that from my parents. When customers would make racist comments in their store, my father never responded with anger. He focused on building the best neighborhood grocery possible. Eventually, those same people became loyal customers who defended him against others' prejudice. Weiss nodded thoughtfully. The board made the right choice hiring you. The next morning, I arrived early to find Alton's office already empty, his personal items gone. Chairman Weiss had called him the previous evening to request his resignation, effective immediately. At 9 a.m., Weiss gathered the entire operations department. The team that had stood against me yesterday now sat uncomfortably, avoiding eye contact. Yesterday's events were unfortunate but clarifying, Weiss began. After reviewing substantial evidence, the board has unanimously reaffirmed our commitment to global standardization under Zoya's leadership. The stunned silence was broken only by nervous shifting in seats. Effective immediately, all regional offices will report directly to international operations. Senior Director Alton is no longer with the company. The announcement sent ripples of shock through the room. Zoya, Weiss continued, would you like to address the team? I stood, facing the same people who had tried to destroy my career 24 hours earlier. Yesterday, many of you took a stand based on what you believed was right for this company. I began. I respect conviction, even when misplaced. You weren't given accurate information about why standardization matters or how it improves client outcomes. I projected the client retention comparison data. This is why we standardize, not to impose Western approaches, but to deliver consistent excellence everywhere. The regional flexibility some defended was actually inconsistency that drove away our largest clients. I paused, looking across their faces. Starting today, we rebuild not as separate regional fiefdoms, but as one global team. Those willing to support this vision have a place here. Those who cannot should consider whether this is still the right company for them. Over the following weeks, 3 regional directors resigned. The remainder, seeing the evidence and client feedback firsthand, became standardization champions. Within 6 months, Brightway returned as a client. Universal followed 3 months later. The quarterly board meeting 1 year after the rebellion showcased our transformation. Client satisfaction, up 40%. Global revenue increased 28%. And operational costs, reduced by 17% through eliminated redundancies. As I concluded this presentation, I noticed Lana, now promoted to Regional Implementation Director, smiling from the back of the room. She had been the first to risk everything by telling me the truth. Now, she led the team, ensuring standardization actually delivered value in each market. The best revenge wasn't destroying Alton or humiliating those who stood against me. It was building the globally consistent operation they claimed was impossible, and proving that standardization didn't destroy regional relationships, but actually strengthened them by ensuring every client received our best, regardless of location or connections. Sometimes true leadership isn't about winning the argument, but changing the conversation entirely. If you found this corporate revenge story satisfying, please hit that like button and share with friends who appreciate strategic thinking over dramatic confrontation. And if you want to hear more stories about professional women who outsmart rather than outshout their opponents, subscribe to this channel. I promise you'll never look at office politics the same way again. Comment below about a time when you had to play the long game to overcome workplace obstacles. Thanks for listening.